Back in that bag again. Whoa, yeah.
Welcome, everyone, to the Splash City Basketball Podcast, your home for everything hoops in the land of 10,000 lakes. I'm your host, Steve Hartman. Excited for today's episode. I got Matt Karuma, a Columbia Heights grad, player at North Dakota State. Currently, he is sponsoring a team in the Twin Cities Pro-Am, Siddiqui Capital, and excited to talk to him about that, about the Pro-Am, about his journey as a player, about coaching at St. Anthony High School. Lots of great insights from Matt, super fun conversation, even some fun stories about players, trash talkers, Coach Dave Richman from NDSU, all that kind of stuff ahead. If you are enjoying the podcast, or if this is your first time, follow us or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and give us a follow on social media. Love to hear from you. I'd love for you to provide thoughts, ideas, funny quips, critiques, whatever you want. I'm here to serve the basketball community and to talk all the hoops that matter to Minnesotans. So with that, let's get into my conversation with Matt Karuma. I'm extremely excited for today's phenomenal guest, a guy who has seen the game from every angle possible. I think Columbia Heights High School to playing at NDSU against Gonzaga and March Madness. Now as a high school coach and manager of a Twin Cities Pro-Am team, along with the day job, the regular job. Joining me today is Matt Karuma. Thanks for joining, Matt. Welcome.
Oh, awesome. No, happy to be here. And thanks for having me, Steve. I'm excited to kind of dig in a little bit and provide any insight I can.
Yeah, well, I think you'll have a lot. There's a lot of topics, a lot of different ways we could go. I want to start, though. You were just out at NBA Summer League. I was just out there. How was that experience? And you know, what did you take away from being out in Vegas for a few days?
Sure. No, Summer League was awesome. It was actually my first time going to Summer League. I tried to get out there last year and scheduling wise couldn't make it with the Pro-Am and some of the other things we had going on. But super awesome to be out there and kind of see. It seems like, you know, those games and like that environment, it's like just about basketball, and it's really cool to experience that. And the other reason we're down there is they have a Summer League film festival where filmmakers can submit their sports-based content. And then there's a selection committee that chooses which ones are going to premiere at Summer League. So Terrence Brown, an athlete from Columbia Heights also actually, his documentary, Hoop State, the story of Terrence Brown, with Gabe, who was the filmmaker on it, was selected. So he did the premiere down there, and it was really cool to kind of see that, you know, the storytelling side of basketball takes center stage at Summer League. So really cool event. They did a really good job putting that on. I'm excited to see what Gabe and Terrence come up with in terms of a final version of it. And we were lucky enough to kind of see a screening of the draft and where the doc's at now. So super cool experience overall, and I'm happy to go back next year, or excited to go back next year.
Yeah, Terrence Brown has had quite a college run here. I mean, he was on some great high school teams. I think they beat De La Salle to go to state one of those years that he was there. And he ends up out in Utah. Now he's going to North Carolina. Just a really high scoring player and super fun to watch. So that'll be really cool to check out. When you said Gabe, is that Gabe Matson? Because he was out there too. Are they working on this together, Minnesota guys?
I'd have to double check his last name. I think that's right. His IG tag is directed by Gabe. So okay. I just met him in person for the first time at Summer League. I think he played at Armstrong. And then now is living in LA and mostly doing filmmaking and content related things. So a lot of cool stuff coming from him. He's a super creative guy.
Nice. Different.
He can hoop a little bit too. Yeah, he can hoop a little bit too. But
okay, all right, cool, man. That's awesome. Yeah, Summer League's it's another thing. I haven't done the film festival, but like that goes on. I think they had some women in sports event going on that same weekend or right after during Summer League too. So it's a fun place to be. As far as like, let's back up on your journey a little bit, because I kind of want to get the background. There's some cool connections you and I have with North Dakota State. But you started at Columbia Heights. You went to Bismarck State College and then to NDSU at the Division I level. What do you kind of, when you look back at your journey in basketball, what was some of the highlights, and maybe like is there a moment that stands out to you as like, this is when I fell in love with the game of basketball?
Sure. Yeah, I think fell in love with the game of basketball was probably pretty early on. I just always kind of loved. I mean, I was the kind of kid who had binders full of basketball cards, and
Oh yeah.
I'd go pretend to be people in the driveway and things like that. So that
Yeah.
part of it was pretty early. And then being lucky enough to play at Columbia Heights for two really good coaches, and doing so at a time where like Columbia Heights was really peaking in a big way. We had Jacob Thomas, who was the number one rated player in Minnesota, and then Zach Lofton, who to this day is one of the
Mm.
best basketball players I've ever seen in my life up close and personal. And I think, falling in love with the game early, getting to Columbia Heights and getting to see the kind of super fan environment and seeing basketball at a super high level between those two being a little bit ahead of where I was at, that just kind of lit a fire under what was already there and allowed me to kind of see like, wow, this thing is a lot bigger than I thought. And I really want to be a part of that. And I would say the same thing kind of continued to happen. Like JUCO was, a great experience. Got to travel and play basketball and go to school and have a little bit of autonomy. And then North Dakota State was kind of, the next iteration of that, where again, I was lucky to play on a team that had a lot of really talented guys, Carlin Dupree, Corey Brown, Lawrence Alexander, Dexter Werner, those kind of guys. Like, and seeing basketball at a high level, being able to experience a national tournament was kind of, it kind of brought out that same starry-eyed kid who fell in love with the game when I was younger. He came back in high school when I got to see Jake and Zach, and then, came back again at NDSU when I got to experience the national tournament and playing at the Division I level. Probably did more watching than playing, but being around that atmosphere and getting to get in when I could was a really awesome experience.
Yeah, I mean, like as a kid growing up loving basketball, March Madness is one of the things, right? Game 7 NBA Finals
Hmm.
is probably another one where you just imagine yourself. Um, and like, what were those emotions like as you're like maybe even just taking that practice floor, knowing you're playing
Sure.
the second seeded Gonzaga, and I mean,
Hmm.
future NBA players like Domantas
Right.
Sabonis was on that team,
Yep.
Kyle Wiltshire, Kevin Pangos, like that was a great Gonzaga team. I mean, what was
It
that
was.
like just getting hyped for that game and that experience?
Yeah, no, it was really cool. It was fun, especially being in college, right? Because as a mid-major, you have to win your conference tournament to go
Hmm.
to the dance. So it kind of felt like an arrival in a way, like, or this is the cool moment, like we got here because you win the conference tournament and then there's no classes, there's no school for like a week and a half, so you're just practicing basketball, and then you're taking a charter flight out to. We played in Seattle, which is 2 hours from Spokane, so I got a bone to pick with the schedulers about that, but fun to get out there, like, police escorts to the game, and it was all this like, what is happening right now, and you get to
Yeah.
practice or shoot around, and media is at practice or shoot around, which is like that happens, but on that scale, like it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. As far as the emotion, I think like the real like I would say the biggest emotional part of it was I remember my dad and I watching Steph Curry at Davidson, and then going out in the front yard and trying to shoot 40 footers and do all the things I was seeing him do on TV. And the way the sites work at March Madness is there's multiple games. And so I remember we're in the
Yeah.
tunnel getting ready to go out for warm-ups, and Davidson had just finished playing Iowa. Um, and we see them come off the floor and kind of wait. So they come off and stage, and then we walk out and go onto the floor to warm up. And I just remember being in the tunnel and like seeing the Davidson guys and feeling like this is like I'm on the other side of the TV now. This is crazy. And that was
Yeah.
probably the most emotional part of it, and something I still remember having watched those games with my dad growing up, and then kind of feeling like I was inside of the TV at that point was pretty nuts.
That's awesome. I remember '09 NDSU played Kansas at Metrodome in the first round,
Oh,
and that
sure.
was kind of
With Woody.
very
Yeah,
eye-opening. Yeah, Woodside was unreal. He was very Alexander like point
sure.
guard,
Yeah.
just getting buckets, and like it was
Yeah, they're
awesome.
dogs.
Those first round games are so fun. Target Center is actually hosting some first round games next year, so I can't wait to hopefully attend that again. But those are
Sure.
moments where you're just like those there's kids there who will never experience that again, and it's just a really
Hmm.
cool moment for them. You played under Dave Richman. That was his first year as head coach. Dave was on
Yep.
my pod earlier this year before they played Michigan State. What do you remember about him in his first season as a head coach?
Sure. I think the one thing that comes to mind with Dave, Actually, I'll back up because now that I say that, the first thing that comes to mind with Dave is I was pretty close with Lawrence. He was a really good guy, and Lawrence was at a different kind of stage in terms of team role and relationship with Dave than I was. So I remember, like, we'll be in the locker room or at the dining center or whatever talking about Coach, and we would all just call him Dave because we hung out with Lawrence, and Lawrence would call him Dave. So I remember referring to him as Dave at practice one time, and that was in hindsight not the right title, but he handled it really gracefully. But I kind of got to think to myself, like, yeah, I'm not Lawrence, I probably shouldn't call him by his first name. But
Yeah.
now I haven't been out of school, I'll just call him Dave. And I would say, kind of in line with that, like, I do remember Dave as being like almost brutally honest and brutally fair. So like he was never going to sugarcoat things. He would tell you what you needed to hear, not what you wanted to hear. And he would absolutely never negotiate with you on like holding yourself to the standard of like what we agreed North Dakota basketball or what you as an individual player were going to be. Right, you'd make that deal at the beginning of the year, and the deal was done. Right, like we're not having another conversation about it. And I think that was a big part of why he is being able to experience the success that he's experienced. I mean, there's 100 things I could say about Dave that would kind of line up with that, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is that, and that standard that he holds for himself and the program, and not negotiating on that or backing down at all. Something I really admire about him, and something that really helped us in a lot of ways, even post basketball. And he's still willing to hop on a call and kind of give you that same, what do you need to hear, not what do you want to hear, and do it in a loving way. And yeah, really love that about him.
Yeah, he set the standard, like you said. Like, obviously, Tim Miles before him, Saul Phillips before him, but like there is a standard there, and them getting to the tournament again this year. I don't know how many that is now for him, 5 maybe, just for Dave.
Yeah, I lost track. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's awesome. So good stuff. Let's pivot a little bit to current form and how you're involved in basketball, because last week I went to the Twin Cities Pro-Am. And, I really enjoy that. I take my son every year just because how often do you get that close to some
right.
super high level players, professional players, things like that. Tell the listeners kind of how you got involved with the Twin Cities Pro-Am and what your role is with Siddiqui Capital and the Twin Cities Pro-Am team.
Sure. Yeah. So, I've always kind of admired the Pro-Am from afar. I think it might have got started right around the time when I was at NDSU. And I remember seeing the clips and the Instagram and stuff and thinking like, I got to be involved with that. And even talking to some of my teammates, like, hey man, when you go to Minneapolis, let me know, like if we can sneak in a game or whatever the case may be. So, eventually I got done playing and started, Jamar Diggs, who, I believe founded the Pro-Am, kind of weaseled my way in through mutual contacts and things like that to get his number and kind of bug him about like, hey man, is there any team that has an extra spot? Like, can we sneak in? This looks really awesome what you're doing. So kind of snuck in as a player, maybe 4 or 5 years ago and played for a few years that way. And then last year, was my first year actually being able to sponsor a team. So that's Siddiqui Capital. And we were able to have some success and have some good players in, and just being part of that environment is super fun. And doing it from this end is really cool too. And being able to kind of, in some ways, be on the other side of that too, right? There's younger guys who want to be involved, and to be able to like, we have a couple high schoolers that we've got into games this year and last year. Brett Soroin, who's a recent St. Anthony grad, played his first game last summer. He played a couple games with us, and he's on the full-time roster this year. So kind of think of the Pro-Am without being too, I guess, gushy about it, but it kind of is like a love letter to Minneapolis in a lot of ways, where like kids get to come in and see all of these guys play for free, and they're all young enough to appreciate, like, to the point earlier about the tournament, right? Like, these guys don't just live on the other side of the TV. It's not going to be easy if that's where you want to go, but like they get to see like it's possible. Like, you can see these guys, you can interact with them, and like if you do what you need to do, like you have a chance to maybe get there one day. So I think that piece of it is super cool for me.
Have the high school guys always been involved? Because I think that's a really cool touch. So you get these guys, I mean, obviously grown men, 30-year-olds, playing
Mm-hmm.
against some high school kids. There's some challenges there, but I think I find it really fascinating. Like I watched Brett play last week, and I talked to his brother.
Mm-hmm.
We play in a pickup run together, and we were just
Oh,
talking
sure.
about how last year it was like, whoa, and this is way too fast, and then you see how
Yep.
much that changes in a
I
year.
saw that a little
Um,
bit. Yeah.
yeah, but like Babu An is playing, he's on a roster, and I think KJ Wilson's on a roster. So some of the best
Yep.
players in Minnesota in high school getting to compete against guys who played in Spain or Italy for years and are seasoned vets. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how does that come about? And like, how do you go about picking who's on a roster? Is it just GM's choice, or how do you guys kind of plan that out?
Sure. Yeah. So the league helps us out with it a little bit. There's kind of a
Okay.
pool every summer of guys who are going to want to play.
Mm,
And they also do a pretty good job of like first giving us the autonomy as sponsors to say like, we want these guys. So, it's funny that you mentioned KJ. Actually, KJ was a guy I was like, I really want KJ to play with us. Like, love what he's doing on the court. And he's had some AAU stuff and will hopefully have a chance to get on the floor at some point this summer. But guys like that, right, where like they give us the autonomy to say, I'd really love to have these guys, and you can kind of go out and talk to whoever you want and try to see if they want to play with your team. And then, if there's a year where you might be a little short, maybe I have 6 guys who I think can really compete at that level. They do a good job of stepping in and helping you fill that roster out. Diggs, JW, Eli, a lot of the guys involved in the pro-am like have a pretty good network themselves and do a good job of like trying to keep the parity of the league and making sure everybody has enough to compete on a given night. So it's a little bit of both. You put your roster together, and then the pro-am kind of gives you as much or as little help as you need, kind of fleshing that roster out and making something that's competitive.
For some of the professionals, are there things in their contracts if they're on a contract like they can't play in this? Because like I've always wondered, like when Tyus comes, is it because he's between
Mm-hmm.
contracts, and if he
Sure.
gets signed, is he off, or how does that work? I saw Jamison Battle on a roster this year too, and he wasn't there the night we were there, but I'm just curious, like
Mm-hmm.
these guys, maybe NBA, and if it's any different in Europe, I don't know.
Sure. So I'm not sure on Europe. I would imagine European clubs are a little bit more flexible, just the nature of those guys switching teams as often as they do,
Mm,
where they're not really a part of the team during the off season because they might be playing in a different country the next year. For
okay.
NBA, again, that might vary player to player. I my thought would be that it's probably a little bit reverse, where when guys are in between contracts, that's when they're really not going to play, right? Because they could get hurt in the
Okay.
pro-am, and now all of a sudden, if they're negotiating their deal, that's a little
Sure.
bit of a tougher situation for them to be in. So I think like Tyus, for example, I don't know him very well, but there was a couple years ago where I think he was in between contracts and didn't play earlier in the summer and then signed his deal and played a little bit after that.
Got it.
So I think more guys between contracts kind of stay away from it. College, there's some compliance considerations. There's a rule I learned about last year that I wasn't aware of. There's a lot of NCAA rules I'm learning about each and every day, but
Yeah.
for example, with the NCAA, you're only allowed to play in even in the age of NIL, you're only allowed to play in one pro-am. So if you play in another
Oh,
one, you can't play in the Twin Cities pro-am. Other than that, the NCAA and most schools, from a compliance or rules perspective or contracts, guys are allowed to play. The one place NCAA or college differs from the NBA is that like the coach is kind of the head of the snake and the program can operate independently. So there doesn't necessarily need to be a compliance or NCAA rule that says this guy can't play. If the coach has got too much invested in a player, or the player is a big part of the roster and the plan for the season, that risk just doesn't quite make sense for the coach.
mm,
Ultimately, what the coach says is going to go, and we have to respect that because ultimately it's best for the player too. So I would say NBA, I don't know of an explicit rule. I don't think there is one. College, I don't know of any explicit rule in contracts that doesn't allow for guys to play in pro-ams. But there's different league and team kind of dynamics that play into that.
interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have all these kind of questions because it's just,
Sure.
you go and like as a fan, as a former high school coach, there's a lot of good familiarity. And then I'm always spending half the time on my phone trying to figure out, oh, where does this guy
Sure.
play again? Like, what's his story?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when
Yeah.
you build out your roster for this, is there like what is that process? Because obviously you want the best players you can get, but is there like hey, we need a mix of this kind of guy, this kind of guy? You look, I noticed like some of the, there's a lot of like NAIA D3, D2, all the way to
Hmm.
D1 guys. So like, when just for you personally and your team, Siddiqui Capital, what's kind of your vision for roster building?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's a really good way to phrase the question because like my vision for roster building is drastically different probably than some of the sponsors, and the same could be said
Hmm.
for them. I think our vision or my vision at Siddiqui Capital is I want to build like first and foremost, like a team that's fun to play for. Like these guys aren't getting paid. It's a lot of fun to play in the league, but at the end of the day, they're putting their bodies at risk. They're giving away their off time in the off season to come play.
Hmm.
So with that, I want to respect that and make sure like if they're going to come play for us, I want it to be advantageous for everybody. So I have Josh Pratt and Dane Emmert, who I coach with at St. Anthony, as the coaches of the team, just to kind of take and coming from somebody who's played in the league a little bit and played a little bit, there's kind of a significant amount of mental bandwidth that comes with some of those coaching decisions, right? Like, I don't want to be a guy who stands up in the middle of the game and goes and tells another player they're out because I'm checking in. So they do a really good job of being qualified coaches and just handling the coaching part of the basketball game,
Yeah.
and then helping me out with the roster building thing too. In terms of the overall kind of roster building philosophy, you're always trying to find that happy medium between like, everybody who plays in that league obviously is really talented. And some guys are on the upper end of that spectrum versus others who are maybe more towards the middle. And you're trying to trying to kind of find that balance between upper level talent and availability, right? Because the summer league's happening right at the beginning of Pro-Am. So last year we had, maybe 4 or 5 guys who were at NBA Summer League, which is, I mean, I was kind of like, well, I can't believe those guys are going to come play for us. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like, well, that means for the next week or two, I'm going to have to be on the horn a couple hours a day trying to find enough subs to compete with professional basketball players on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of those, NAIA guys and different level college basketball players come in where they're a little bit more available in the summer and just as able to compete at that level. So you want to find enough guys that are going to be there every night and be able to play, and then find enough upper level talent. So when we played YHIC the other night, I think Javon Hadley and Dane Danger are both playing for them. So you need enough kind of big dogs to hopefully slow them down a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny because I saw Dane on one of the rosters a couple weeks
He's
ago,
unreal. Yeah.
and then I was like, dude, he's crushing it for the Nets. I'm like, I don't know if he's
Yeah.
gonna come back and play in this Twin Cities Pro-Am when he's like, I think he had like 14 the game I saw out in Vegas. I mean, he looked good. So,
He's a beast. And I think that team actually, so to kind of not go on too much further on the question, but like with the roster building philosophy. So that team this year, I think, is coached by Coach Ware, who's at Hopkins now and has some Park Center ties. And a lot of those guys are Park Center alum. And what a
mhm.
alumni list to have. That team is a juggernaut.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny you see that. Like, there's like a Park Center group. There's a full De La Salle group, of course, too. A couple Cretin Durham Hall guys as well.
Hmm.
Um, what is when you pitch a player to come and play in the pro am, what does kind of that pitch look like? What does it sound like? Is it, hey, stay in shape, compete, that kind of thing? Is what does that pitch look like?
Sure. I think 90 to 95% of the legwork has already been done for us as sponsors, just in terms of like the
Okay.
job that the Twin Cities Pro-Am has done establishing the league and the presence that it has in Minneapolis. Guys know the Pro-Am and kind of want to play in the Pro-Am for the most part. So a lot of the work is done behind the scenes for us already, and just the way
Mm,
that they've continued to build out the league and make it a cool place to play and a cool place to be. And then from there, it's just kind of like, who do I know or who do I know that knows the guy that I want to play, and kind of getting on the horn and trying to find a way to get in touch with the guys that you hope will play for you. Would like to get to a point where, hopefully we create an environment that's fun enough where guys want to just come back and play for us. And we do have a few guys returning from last year. But with last year being, our first year as a team, some guys, aren't in Minneapolis for the summer. We had Titan
mhm.
Anderson play last year, who's a monster. He's super talented, super high motor, and just any team on the pro am would be lucky to have him. But him, for example, he's not from Minneapolis. He just happened to be in Minneapolis last summer, and the pro am's done a good enough job establishing themselves that it was something he wanted to do.
Mm.
So you just kind of reach out to whoever you can to get in touch with these guys. And for the most part, they kind of know enough about the pro-am that you don't have to do a whole lot of selling. It just becomes more of an availability thing.
Got it. Got it.
And then getting a hold of them in the first place. But
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's things where I'll see certain trainers working guys out for whether it's NBA draft or combine or summer league or whatever, and I always wonder how many players are just hanging out in the Twin Cities working in the summer, like because it's more than I would
right,
guess, there's a few outfits where I'm like, oh man, that's a pretty big name. As like a college basketball fan, I'm always like, man, that's he was a heck of a college player. Like I didn't realize he was working out in the Twin Cities.
right,
So I'm sure you get some of that too, where guys are just like you said, just here working out with a certain trainer.
right. Yeah, in a lot of ways, I'm just like anybody else too, right? Like I'm a hoops fan still and a junkie at heart, so I'll be scrolling on
Yeah.
Instagram. Like I had no idea that guy was in Minneapolis. Like, let me hop in the DMs and try to track down whoever I need to track down to see what he's up to the next week. And that's actually usually what I lead with is kind of like, hey, what are you up to in July?
Oh, nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome. On the business side of it, I'm always curious because I'm as a fan, I love that it's free. I'm also shocked that
Hmm.
it's free. So like I've been kind
Sure.
of telling everybody that I know, like, yeah, you got to go, man. This is great. It's super fun. But like,
Right.
I mean, we don't have to get into any specifics, but just like kind of curious on how the business of the program works and like, is it all sponsor driven then? And then, that's why there isn't any admission fees or anything like that for fans.
Sure. Yeah, so I don't know all of the details. I do know from a sponsor perspective, like there's enough information out there for me to piece a good chunk of it together. So as a team sponsors all pay to be a sponsor of the pro-am. And then there's, registration as well, for each team. So that kind of covers, I would imagine, at least a good portion of the league's overhead.
Mm,
And then I think also independent of that, I think I'm kind of speaking for Diggs and JW and Eli and all those guys a little bit here, but I think at the pro-am level, they've really made that kind of a point of emphasis that like they want kids to show up and be able to just watch a game, or they want,
mm,
parents are already getting off of work and driving over to, whatever gym after a long day with four of their kids and getting dinner and all those things afterwards. Like they want kids to be able to be there. They want people to be able to experience this. That's why I think in a lot of ways it is kind of a, love letter to Minneapolis. Like
mm,
they want the city to be able to experience this, and, removing that barrier to entry, I think is a really important thing. And if the economics work, I'm sure they do work out, but I don't think that's the primary driver for what they're doing here. So I think a big part of it is like they just want kids to be able to see it.
that's awesome. I mean, it's phenomenal because, like I said, it's something that I've now is a tradition for me and my son, and we'll bring a couple of his buddies and go out to eat in Minneapolis, and it's a great experience. I'm happy to
Right.
hear that. One of the talkers in the NBA at Summer League, at least because it was in Vegas, was expansion. Does
Hmm.
the Twin Cities Pro Am? We got 6 teams. Is there ever talk of expansion? Do we get more players, more teams in the future?
Sure. I mean, I would say I was definitely on the horn about expansion before I got a team. So I was trying my best, and they let me kind of sneak in and grab one. I think it might be a cool idea down the road. The pro-am guys, who run the league could probably speak to it a bit better than me. The way I see it and from what I understand is that becomes a tricky balance with, especially with a lot of European and college guys. Like they have a very short window when they're home at all.
Mm,
So to find, 60 guys to field 6 teams that are home between, beginning of July and beginning of August and able to play 2 or 3 nights a week, is a bit of a challenge in and of itself. And the more teams you add to that, right, the more difficult it might get.
sure.
I think also the other thing to be mindful of is there are other pro-ams around the country that do have multiple teams, and you see it on Instagram, and they are really great leagues. And if you get like a LeBron or one of those guys to show up every couple of years, then those leagues do grow a lot. The tricky
Mm,
part is then you have the Tuesday nights when those guys aren't there and you have 25 teams and, where are you going to find the, few hundred guys that are able to play at that caliber and they're all in the same city in the short window. So it's a very difficult kind of space or needle to thread for the pro-am in
sure.
terms of when guys are available in the summer. I don't think it's something that they're actively opposed to. I think it's just really challenging to find the guys. So maybe we'll see more teams in the pro-am down the road. I think it'd be cool to just kind of see the league grow, and if that means more teams or whatever the case may be, I think that'd be really cool. But I'll leave that to the
Yeah.
pro-am to kind of figure out how to make that work on top of all the other things they're already doing.
Yeah, for sure, sure. That was just a selfish question because more
Sure.
basketball, more teams, more players. Love it.
Yep. I'm all about
Yeah.
more games. Yeah.
Yeah. um, just to put a bow on the pro-am, started July 11th, runs through like the 6th of August or something like that. Is that when is that championship?
Yeah, I'd have to double check. Generally, the championship, and I'm just pulling it up quick. I think it's usually that first week of August. So there'll
Okay.
be a seeding day. Opening weekend of the Pro-Am and seeding day are kind of unique in that both of them are on Saturdays, which is really
Mm-hmm.
cool. And there are also 2 days where every team is going to play. So that's really cool. I'd have to look at. I think it's right around the end of August or beginning of August.
Yeah.
So there'll be a seeding day right after the regular season, where again it'll be a Saturday. All 6 teams are going to play back to back to back, and then they'll kind of use that to readjust the seeds if needed based on how teams perform that day. And then it's win or go home after that.
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially fans have 2 weeks, 2 full weeks, games Monday, Tuesday, Thursday until the seeding day on a Saturday, you said?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. No, seeding
Check
day
out
is on a Saturday.
Yeah, check out the schedule. Just Google Twin Cities Pro-Am schedule. It's online. But yeah, 2 weeks left roughly. Get out there, watch it. Matt, you are a sponsor, Siddiqui Capital. We were talking a little bit about NIL before. It's always a hot topic. You've waded into those waters a little bit. Just
Hmm.
maybe high level, any changes or anything coming down the line that you could see with NIL and how that's obviously it's changed college basketball tremendously. I mean, I've even hearing things in high school and stuff like that around it. But
Hmm.
um, what can fans, I guess, like, expect maybe in the next year or two, if anything, from a legislation standpoint or NCAA standpoint? Anything you know of or could foresee? I'm not going to hold you to it, of course.
Sure. Good deal. Yeah. I would say I think the NCAA has been in antitrust litigation, I think at the Supreme Court level for a number of years now, which is how some of this has, finally been able to take shape. I think changes we could see, or a lot of conversations being had, are around the employment status of college basketball players. As of right now, they're all 1099, which, if you're familiar, is or if the audience is familiar, means that they're all businesses. Every single player is paid as though they're a business or an independent contractor. Whereas, in the NBA or NHL, I'm pretty sure the NFL too, they're paid as a W-2, which is the same as any other job. So that comes with a lot of in addition to having these large sums of money for a lot of these players, that comes with a lot of complexity that most people, don't step into unless they're actively choosing to be a business owner. Day one, the second you receive an NIL check, whether you wanted to be or not, you are a business. There may be a lot of conversations in the next couple of years about that. That's something I'd keep an eye on, especially when it comes to, players transferring. There's a lot of varying opinions on, whether guys should be able to go to a school and leave after a year. They're independent contractors, so ultimately, if you look at the NBA, there's multi-year contracts, right? You play for the Timberwolves, you sign a 3-year deal for $30 million or whatever it is. You're playing for that team for 3 years and you have a contract, and maybe they trade you, maybe they don't, but you're playing for that team for 3 years if nothing else changes. In college, they're all 1 year deals. And when you kind of get into that employee territory, that's where you're dealing with kind of arguments or pretty concrete evidence against amateurism, which has been at the heart of NIL not happening the last 50 years. So I think there'll be a lot of conversations to be had about what these contracts look like and what the obligation of the institution and the player is going to be going forward.
Hmm.
And hopefully
I was always,
something to address ticket prices too for fans, because I think that's one way cost is getting offset that I'd like to see changed.
yeah. Yeah. Well, there's, lots of money being made somewhere, and it wasn't the players for a long time. And so I think, as a fan, I know it's hard to take sometimes the changes, but I will say that last year was one of the most enjoyable college basketball seasons I've watched, just from a
It's been awesome, isn't
bas
it? Yeah.
yeah, but from a basketball perspective, the number of older guys staying, which is creating
Hmm.
some of the good basketball, and then that freshman class last year was just crazy. So there's good
Right.
to it as well, and I think players being treated, or seeing some of the financial impact of the game is a good thing overall.
Yeah. And without sounding too soapboxy, I think there might be more frustrated fans than others out there, but I think one thing to remember at the end of the day is like these guys are 19 to 23 years old. Like if I was 22 and another job or another school offered me, $1 million to go to their school next year, like I'd be signing the paper at the airport. Like,
Right. What
so
would all of us do? Any company comes
right.
with more money, people leave, and like that's just how it
Mhm.
goes. So yeah, people cheer for laundry is a different breed, though. They don't always think of it that way.
Right.
Um, Speaking of that kind of money, like as a financial advisor, I mean that's crazy, right? If you think about like a
Yeah.
19-year-old making like $7 million at Louisville or Kentucky or
Hmm.
whatever, like are there like what do you tell someone? I don't know if you would can share anything, but like I'm always like, how do you manage a kid's, I mean, a young adult's money that's just comes into it that fast and that quickly, and it's just life-changing money. It's
Right.
wild.
No, it really is. And I think it comes with a lot of responsibility, especially with it being a new space. Like you want to behave in a way that's ethical and in any, money management or even outside of money in any advisory role, you always want to lead with what's best for the client or what's best for the player. And I think, for a lot of guys, right, they're, like I said, 19 to 23, 24 years old. Um, so, I'm still young enough to remember where my head was at 19 to 24 years old. And, to add on to that, right, they're learning about S corps, they're learning about estimated tax payments. They're all a business the second that they sign that NIL deal. So a lot of it's education, right? Like what do all these things mean? I think most people are in their 30s or 40s that might make their head spin, managing, estimated tax payments. And yeah, I had a couple 100,000 come in this month, and that is life changing, and that's awesome. But at the same time, like I'm gonna have to write a check to the IRS for, 50 to $100,000 next month, and I'm 18 or 19. Like that's
Yeah.
wild. So a
Yeah.
lot of it's education and teaching them what some of these things mean, because for them, not only on the court, but now off the court, their learning curve is as steep as it's ever been. And it comes with a really large amount of life-changing opportunities. And at the same time, the margin for error is razor thin, right? You think about a normal, person like you or I planning for retirement, we're going to work, hopefully on the lower end, but on average, probably, 30 to 40 years working a job to save enough for retirement, and then live for 15 years, spend that money. And, we call it end of retirement and advisory, but that would be kind of the end of everything, right? When you're no longer with us. Whereas for an athlete, that's flipped on its head, right? Your peak earning years are 10 years and your retirement period is going to be 50 or 60 years. So you got 10 years to get that right. And most of the money is coming in that window. And if you don't make the right choices, or if you do make the right choices, depending on what you do, that 50 or 60 years after you're done playing can look a lot different.
Wow, that's when you put it into those terms, that is wild to think about. And I am going to use the end of retirement
Sure.
verbiage from now
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Use that at a funeral maybe to keep
yeah.
emotions a little lower.
Hey, they didn't die. They just ended retirement.
Exactly.
Um, all right. I mean, that's always a fascinating topic. I ran into a guy at pickleball and we were talking about NIL. He had some connections with St. Thomas and I was just like, this is crazy to me. Just,
Yeah.
mostly just because I'm not smart enough to understand a lot of the financial components of it, but just, yeah, that idea of young kids, getting access to things like that and then having to plan their life for the 50 years,
Right.
it's just wild. So,
Right. At
um,
22 or 20 or
yeah,
whatever it is. Yeah. We're
yeah.
all learning as we go.
Oh God. Yeah. I am not, it is too far in the past for me to remember, but I can guarantee you I was not in a good headspace just to make lifelong
Sure.
financial
Yeah.
decisions at that age.
No kidding.
Um, so that was a serious topic. I want to end quickly on a couple of rapid fire kind of fun questions with you, Matt, if you got a couple minutes here.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's talk about kind of going back to playing days. Actually, playing with GM days. Hardest player to guard in the Pro-Am for you or
Hardest player.
anybody right now? Like who's the hardest
Sure.
player to guard?
I mean, I think Terrence Brown is pretty hard to guard. Thankfully, I was lucky enough to catch him when he was 15, 16 years old, so I got a little bit less embarrassed than some other guys might get. I haven't actually guarded him in the Pro-Am, but he's pretty tough. The hardest guy I've ever guarded in the Pro-Am. Um, I want to say, obviously, skill-wise, Tyus is pretty difficult to guard. Trey Jones is really hard to guard, but I think two that really come to mind are Anton Kimmins is the fastest human being I've ever seen in my life. And I was on the wrong end of a couple switches with him. And then Kyle, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing his last name right, but I think his last name's Wishart, or Calvin Wishart.
Kelvin,
He's
Delano.
Calvin Wishart. He is an absolute demon. I don't appreciate getting stuck on an island with him either.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about the Pro-Am is the trash talking you can hear almost plain as day.
Yeah. There's a lot of it.
Who's the best trash talker? Could be Pro-Am, could be anywhere. Who is the best trash talker you ever encountered?
Best trash talker. I don't want to dance. I don't want to evade the question, but I would say from my definition and a kind of KD, like move in silence sort of way, it'd probably be Tyus because he'll absolutely, a couple of years ago when I was playing every game, he'll do something that makes you look absolutely ridiculous and he'll have no reaction. Like he expected to embarrass you and he's not surprised by it. He's not emotionally affected by it. This is what was going to happen. He took one look at you and knew this is where it was going.
That's almost worse. The silence of
like, exactly.
I got everything I need, and you're
100%. And then Anthony Tucker too, I think is very similar in that way. He's not playing anymore. I think he's more involved with Hoop Habits now, but very similar to Tyus in that like he knows exactly where he wants to get, and it's inevitable in a way. And that inevitability when you switch on to him, it's like it's worse than anything he could say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the Thanos inevitability there.
Exactly.
Okay, last one. You mentioned coaching at St. Anthony. What's a takeaway from your journey as a player, as a coach, that you share with the guys that coming through your program at St. Anthony? Like, is there a piece of wisdom that you try to, impress on them at any time you start a season?
Sure. Yeah. It's mostly recycled Dave Richman quotes, to be honest. And I catch myself doing it way more than I care to admit. He'd always say like 2 hands, 2 eyes, 2 feet, or, the kind of how you do anything is how you do everything ideology. So it's a lot of tidbits like that. And I think also just the general idea that like sports imitates life in a lot of ways. And like the same things that you do showing up every day, doing your job and like dealing with the kind of non-linear trajectory of success and reward that sports is going to give you, right? You can do all the right things and still lose the game. You can do all the right things and still turn the ball over, miss the shot. But you have to just kind of keep showing up and doing those things every day. I think that is kind of what I most try to convey. And you got to do it in a few different ways with teenagers to kind of see what sticks and then just stick with that language or terminology. And then there's just the idea that like not everything is going to be fair, right? And like you can only control what you can control. And that's not something that's easy to do per se, but it is simple, right? Like you make the decision that this is how I'm going to show up every day, and this is what I'm willing to put into this, and I have zero control over the result. But if I do that, I put myself in the best situation possible to see success.
Great advice. Great advice. Joe and you, mutual friend Joe at St. Anthony, you guys got those kids rolling and on a good
I love Joe. He runs a tight ship.
Yeah. Yep. So appreciate Joe for connecting us, by the way. Shouts to Joe Couillard.
For sure.
Thanks, Matt, for joining. This was super fun. We could go on for hours. Any final plug do you want to do for whether it's Pro-Am, Siddiqui Capital, anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, for sure. I guess speaking of the Pro-Am, we are trying to put together, similar to what we do at St. Anthony, we do a youth night with the varsity team where we invite the kids out to kind of interact with the players a little bit more, maybe do some halftime stuff and some giveaways. We are going to try to expand that to the Twin Cities Pro-Am this year. So next Tuesday, July 28th, I think. First game's at 5:45 we play, and then there'll be another game after us. So we'll try to get some special guests and do some giveaways. We have a few surprises hopefully Tuesday that are gonna come to fruition. So kids will be there for free. The Tender Love and Chicks food truck with a local St. Anthony parent actually is the owner of that, and a few other businesses. So there'll be a chicken food truck outside, concessions inside, and some great hoops and some giveaways and hopefully some special guests inside on Tuesday the 28th. And it's all free. Just come as you are, show up, and have a good time.
At De La Salle High School, 5:45, Tuesday the 28th. I will plan on being there, man. That's awesome. I'm excited for that. Yeah,
no,
sweet.
I'm pumped. Hopefully see you there.
Yeah, for sure. Sweet, man. Well, this was super fun, and I would love to connect again later, maybe during the high school season when you guys are in the thick of it. We can catch you and talk more basketball. But thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. No, let's do it again sometime. Anytime. This was fun.
All right. Thanks. All right, thanks to Matt Karuma for joining me today. Very fun conversation. Definitely going to have him on again and again. If you haven't been there, get on over to the Twin Cities Pro-Am at De La Salle. Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Tuesday, the July 28th, they're going to have a special night with some games and giveaways for kids. So if you got kids who love the game of basketball, get on over there Tuesday at 5:45. Again, great episode. Appreciate Matt for coming on. Lots more to talk about the rest of the summer. Appreciate you being here. If you enjoy the show, if you enjoy the podcast, give us a follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, wherever you're on socials, YouTube, we're on there as well. So thanks again for joining. I'm Steve Hartman. This has been the Splash City Basketball Podcast.
Back in that bag.